Like I was saying, so it's really funny, I was begging, Tara and Kip and Keegan and Fiorella, I wanted to come speak because this is an area of people that I don't get to speak too much of. Mostly I speak to physicians. So I actually have, about 160 slides, and I had my colleague edit about 3/4 of them down, and then I added a few back in there. Anyway, so this talk could easily go, 3 hours. So I'm going to be skipping some of my slides, and I edited out some of the videos I had. There was one of Louis C.K. Anyone see Louis C.K. when God comes back to earth? No one? Oh man, Dan, where's Dan? We should have played that one. I know he's in the doghouse and all that, and he should. Oh, and he should be. Oh, okay. He should be in the doghouse for good reason, but there was one particular clip that I'm going to sort of dovetail into my lecture over here. All right, let's get started here, because I'm not going to probably finish in time. So how long should we live? The oldest person to ever live, Jeanne Louise Calment. She was 122 and a half. She lived in Arles. She wasn't a vegan, unfortunately, but when she was 120, she said, "I have but one wrinkle and I am sitting on it." She drank a glass of port after her evening meal. She even smoked. I don't know if she inhaled, but she did some things that maybe, we don't associate with longevity. Point is, she had a lot of fun, and she lived a stress-free life, and she bicycled past 100 years old, which I intend to do. So this is Dan Buettner's first article that came out in National Geographic magazine, 2005, exploring the blue zones. So blue zones are areas in the world where people live a long time and don't get the current diseases that we see. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer, those are the big ones. Diabetes is oftentimes misdiagnosed, so it should get thrown in with cardiovascular disease. So these are the 5 areas in the world. They painstakingly sent out demographers to explore in vivid details, because back in the old days, and I think Dr. Will could remember when the Hunses were known to be the longest lived people in the world. Well, Dan Buettner sort of disputed that and sent in these demographers, and these are the 5 locations. Costa Rica, one area in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula. Sardinia, in Ikaria, which is an island off the coast of Turkey. The Seventh-day Adventists, and Okinawa. So the Okinawa has been very, very well studied for a number of years. And there was a book written a number of years ago, the Okinawa Program, which I highly recommend that everyone get. It's not a vegan book, but when you start to tease out all of the information, it starts to become more and more clear how we should eat to extend our lifespan. So this is just a little video. I've been to Costa Rica 3 times now. Uh-oh, what happened to the volume? No volume? All right. Anyway, so this is Jose Guevara. You can see he's dancing with his great-great-great-granddaughter. And you can see he's pretty active for 106. And he has spectacular ears. This is me spending some time with him. This guy can read newsprint without glasses. And that's at 106. That's pretty impressive. I want to be like that. Okay, so this is just some of the food. So he had this incredible garden growing on his place, and that's one of the commonalities of all the blue zones. They grow their own food. So this is really, really important. There's a book, Food, Not Lawns, great book that talks about everyone can grow their own food. Even if you have a tiny little apartment, you can still grow your own food. So this was purple corn that they grew on their property, and they made a bunch of different products out of this purple corn. So we'll see, in terms of the ideal foods to eat and the ideal diet, colors are really, really important. Because colors, that's what protects basically plants from oxidative damage. And those plants, if we eat them, we get that same protective antioxidant effect from these flavonoid compounds. So this is Panchita. She's 109 when I went to see her. I took blood from 18 centenarians down in the blue zone about a year and a half ago, and Panchita turned 110. She passed away a couple weeks after I visited her, but she had an incredible spirit. This is her dancing, and this is close to her 109th birthday. And you can see she's moving pretty darn good for 109 years old. So every year they put together this little get-together. You have to have a centenarian card carrying little thing. Got her off the floor off there. All right, how am I doing on my time? 8 minutes. All right. So what do all the blue zones have in common? So that's something, obviously, if these people are living a long time, we should see what the heck they're doing. That's baseline. You can do all the studies you want. You can do all the studies that you want. I'm from New York. I got to talk with my hands. What happened to that wireless clip over here? All right. Summary of the basic tenets of the blue zone. Carbohydrates. When we analyze all those 5 areas, they consume between 60 to 75% of their calories from carbohydrate. So in my profession, the naturopathic profession, there's a lot of talk about paleo diets and ketogenic diets, and it's really frustrating because having taught nutrition for 25 years, it's like they're not really getting the message. Carbohydrates are the foods that we really need to eat. And when we talk about some of the other tenets like fiber, that's critical. And that's something that I'm glad you talked about that and what the health. Just Michael Greger mentioned it just very briefly. The question is not where do you get your protein, the question is where do you get your fiber? Fiber is the most important constituent in your diet for a gazillion reasons. So types of carbohydrates, proteins 10 to 20% of your calories, and we're going to go through a little bit about how they actually measure protein requirements, because that's something I never hear anyone talk about, and it's something that's really important because the RDAs are set actually quite high, and to make the RDAs is actually really simple, and we're going to do the calculations in a couple of minutes. Fat should make up 10 to 20% of total calories. Types of fats, mostly polyunsaturated fatty acids. Omega-6 to omega-3 fats should be about 5 to 1 or less. So where do we get omega-3 fats from? Well, most people associate that with eating fish. So I'm here to say that we don't want to eat fish, that we want to eat what fish eat, which is algae. And so that's something, there's thousands and thousands of variety of algae that we don't eat. In fact, we only eat 1/2 of 1% of all edible food on the planet. That's like incredible. So, part of my reason for wanting to do this talk is we need to make sure as vegans that we need to be as healthy as possible, because a sick vegan is a bad demonstration of what we're trying to accomplish. And so that's part of my goal for doing triathlons. I wear a shirt that says eat plants, pet animals, and I try to wear it when I go to the airport and show it off. Anyways, as much as do my role. Incidentally, I think I'm the record for the most purchases of DVDs, COWSPIRACY, over $3,000 worth of DVDs. I'm gonna bet Kip though on that, Michael Pollan thing about the deck of cards though. All right, so we better get going. Hara Hachibu. How many people know what Hara Hachibu is? Not you, Dan. Not you. Hara Hachibu is a saying they say in Okinawa, and before each meal they say, eat until I'm 80% full. Now I usually eat till I'm Hara Hachibu times 2, which is bad, but I only eat 2 meals a day. So one of the things that we know is what people die of. We talked about cardiovascular disease, cancer. That's the Okinawa program. lowest rates of cancer in the world, Japan and Okinawa, and also cardiovascular disease. And this is what we know. Calorie restriction is the single most important thing you can do to extend your lifespan and increase your health. So when you know that fact, then the next thing is, well, let's add plant foods that add fiber and also some really important constituents like potassium, magnesium, and trace elements. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So this slideshow will be available to anyone that wants it. We have someone that will take your emails and etc. Okay, what do we know concerning dietary factors? Fiber. The average person in the United States gets about 11 grams of fiber a day. That's really sickeningly bad. So fiber is so critical for a number of reasons. And cardiovascular disease we know kills more than anything. And one of the chief things is elevated levels of LDL cholesterol, especially particle numbers. And so that's something that fiber is going to address. So Dennis Burkett, which I have a slide we're going to go over briefly, was a researcher back in the 70s who studied indigenous people throughout Africa. And he found that when your fiber intake got over 80 grams, there was no diverticular disease, no colon cancer, no Crohn's disease. It was like amazing. And it was like, wow, that's kind of important. And there's a number of reasons for that. Sodium, we should be consuming about 0.5 gram to 2.5 grams a day. That's not very much. A bag of chips and you've already blown your total for the day. So it's something that, in my practice, I try to stress to my patients. There's a gazillion other spices out there aside from salt. You should use them. And that's part of the ideal diet, is to make sure that we use a broad spectrum of various spices like, cumin, turmeric, ginger, garlic, all those things. So my assertion is if every restaurant in the country replaced their salt and pepper shaker with a garlic shaker and some curry powder, that the incidence of cardiovascular disease and hypertension would go down rather dramatically. I mean, it's unbelievable to think in this country, 2/3 of the population of this country is either high or high normal blood pressure. That's like crazy. And it has to do, in part, to the level of sodium. The other part is potassium. So it is guesstimated that in Paleolithic times, we consumed somewhere around 8 grams of potassium a day. The average American gets 2 grams of potassium a day. Where does potassium come from? Fruits and vegetables. So one of the things that you can do as a little experiment to yourself is to measure how much potassium you get on a daily basis. Because it's not easy to get up to 6 grams of potassium a day. You have to really plan and work at it. And so I have a table I give to my patients that will be available to you that has a list of foods and their potassium content. When you look on the list, there's no animal products with potassium. Also a list of fiber that I give my patients, fiber content of foods. And you look on the list, and when you get to dairy and red meat and fish and chicken, there's 0 grams of fiber in there. So if you're doing a calorie restricted diet, you need to make sure that you make good use of those calories. And I've had this debate with people about, the health benefits of eggs. And it's like, well, for every egg you consume, those calories could be used to get more fiber and potassium in your diet. Okay, flavonoids and antioxidants, which we mentioned. Flavonoids and antioxidants are things that are found in the skins of plants. So those are things that we need to eat as much as possible. So for berries, the smaller the berry, the better. So there's wild berries where I live in Oregon. Out at the coast, we have these salal berries. And my question is, well, how come they're just growing at the beach? Why don't they grow them more commercially? The answer is money. Everything's related to money. If people haven't read Dr. Silas Rao's book, Carbon Yoga, that needs to be a priority. I don't know if I've bought the most books yet, but I'm gunning for it. I've read that book at least 6 times now. All right. Ellagic acid, I'm going to have to skip some of this. Soy lectins, polyphenols. I do want to say something about soy, because soy has gotten a bad rap over the years. For good reason. Over 90% of soy is genetically modified. Most of it's used to feed cows and to feed pigs and to feed chickens. Here's something that's very ironic. Most of soy in the United States is exported to China to feed their chickens. And we import genetically modified soy to feed our chickens from Brazil. And then we, subsidize that whole thing and cut down the trees. And anyway, you already heard that a million times. It's preaching to the choir. So soybeans is something, if it's organic and it's not grown too much, have some incredibly protective substances, one of which, genistein, has been shown to protect against breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer. So soy lectins are something that we want to consume. I know there's a recent book is railing about the deleterious effects of lectins. And it's like, yeah, they could cause some problems, but on the whole, they're very beneficial for us. So don't get sidetracked. Okay, processed foods, small amounts for psychological benefits. Chocolate in particular is my choice of processed foods. So this, I just laid out a spread of foods. These are all foods on my top 20 foods in the world to eat that will extend your lifespan. And so it's like, wow. And that's just one small little table. I forgot to take the sticker off that avocado. How embarrassing. I gotta figure out someone to get that out of there. So everyone thinks of bananas as having the highest amount of potassium. Well, one avocado has 1,360 milligrams. That's almost as much as people get on a daily basis. Some people may require doing juicing to maximize what they're consuming in terms of potassium. There's a number of anti-cancer programs. Dr. Gerson uses an incredible amount of potassium. He has people consuming up to 14 grams of potassium. One of the functions of potassium is to keep your blood more alkaline. So we know that the alkalinity of your blood has a direct effect on inflammation, arthritis, cancer, heart disease. Everything that we know of today is really related to inflammation. So this is an excellent book I came across about a year ago, Foods to Fight Cancer. If you don't have this book, you need to get it immediately. It's one of the best books that I've written. It's not a vegan book. That's what I like about it. But everything in the book is pretty much vegan. And it addresses the issue of that we only eat 0.5% of all edible food on Earth. And we need to expand our horizons. And that means that we need to cultivate a lot of these foods that we're not eating, especially some of these algae. The book's by a French guy, Gingras and Bellevue. Anyway. Talked about fiber and Dennis Burkett. Diversified diet is everything. Okay, so here, how am I doing on my time? Are you sending those cards up? 22. I'm supposed to be... Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm gonna whip through some of these, and I want to show a couple of foods in this list in particular. So quinoa. So the darker the color of food is, like black beans are superior to white beans. So more color means more flavonoids. So people think of brown rice as a health food. Black rice, forbidden rice, is really a health food. More fiber, more flavonoids, more protection. So that's what you're looking at. Red Bhutan rice, better than brown rice, has more colors in it. So the darker the berry, the better the food. Sweet potatoes. I mentioned that the Okinawans for more than 50 years lived 80% of their calories came from sweet potatoes, emo. And a lot of them were purple. So now I see purple sweet potatoes in the store all the time. Purple's got more color, it's got more flavonoids, more carotenoids. How many people saw the movie The Martian? So I thought it was a great movie. Now, if Matt Damon was only a little more up on his nutrition, he would have grown sweet potatoes, and he would not have developed a vitamin A deficiency, because that's one of the deficiencies he had. Interesting enough, potatoes have a significant amount of vitamin C, enough to prevent scurvy, but they don't have any vitamin A, they don't have enough zinc, so he developed those deficiencies. Black beans and lentils. I stay with a couple in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I was their teacher, and they, from some part, Kurukshetra in India, and whenever I would come, they would bring, instead of bringing me the white rice, they would bring me the dark rice and the black lentils, because they knew I was going to put that on their exam, and they better get the exam correct. Broccoli. Purple broccoli, broccolini, broccoli sprouts. So sprouts is something, again, I can't stress enough, something that we all need to be consuming more of in our diet. If you want to juice them, grind them up, whatever you want to do, you should include more of them in your diet. Maqui berries. How many people know about maqui berries? They come from Chile, and they are the highest ORAC value, which is an oxygen antioxidant capacity measuring number, and they have the highest number of any berry, more than acai and some of the other more popular ones. So one of the things that we're looking to do, and Dr. Sailesh Rao is looking to create a sustainable system, a society where, of course, no animals get harmed, but that we grow as many of these foods as possible. And I'm going to show a picture of annatto. Annatto is a food that's grown down in the Amazon, but also in Costa Rica. Okay, so foods protective against prostate cancer. Also, you can say breast cancer as well with this slide. So there's a compound in broccoli and the cruciferous family called glucosinolate. Glucosinolate gets turned by an enzyme called myrosinase. The reason I'm showing you this is I just want to demonstrate a little bit about preparation of food and how critical it is not to eat just cooked foods or frozen foods or processed foods. Now, when I went to nutrition school, it was pretty much, determined that freezing your food was the best thing that you could possibly do. It was the next best thing to fresh. And to some extent that is correct. But this enzyme myrosinase, when you freeze a food like broccoli, you damage that enzyme. Your ability to convert glucosinolates into sulforaphane is greatly reduced. Sulforaphane is a sulfur-containing compound that's protective against numerous types of cancers, and it's something that we need to get as much as possible on a daily basis due to the fact that our exposure to heavy metals and toxicants around the planet is the highest it's ever been in the history of humanity. And we're not even going to get into nukes and depleted uranium. It's a whole other topic, but glucosinolates are very water soluble. So the best way to prepare your foods is to use a pressure cooker. That reduces the amount of time that you cook the food, and it preserves more of the nutrients, including some of the enzymes. So when you microwave foods, microwave damages flavonoid compounds and also enzymes. So, first thing I tell my patients is to get rid of any microwaving, because it's just so easy to do, and it's just, you fall into this trap. Oh, I'm going to eat something healthy, I'll throw it in the microwave. Not good. Broccoli sprouts can contain up to 100 times more glucosinolate than broccoli. Wow, that's a pretty big statement. Okay, continuing on, pomegranate seeds and annatto. How many people know annatto? Annatto's been a food coloring in our food system for about 70 years. It's used as a food colorant. So when I went down to the Amazon, which is right here, we painted our face with annatto. And I was just looking at that color, and because I know colors are good for you, I just thought, wow, that's got to be good for you. About 6 months later, I ran into a researcher who's extracting tocotrienols from annatto. And I'm like, wow, that's great. I knew there was some health benefit. Tocotrienols are a type of vitamin E. It's one of the antioxidants that protects us against oxidative damage, protects us against cancer, heart disease, diabetes, insulin sensitivity. So we need to add more of that into our diet. Okay, nuts and seeds, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds. Flax seeds contain a compound called COWSPIRACY resinol. Took me 2 months to pronounce that word. So I said, and Dr. Chung took it out of my lecture. I said, I'm going to put this back in there because I want to say COWSPIRACY resinol. There it is. And matcha resinol. So these are compounds that are found in very high concentration in flax seeds. So people say, well, where do you get your omega-3 fatty acids from? I say plants. So plants have a significant amount. And flax seeds, really important. So intestinal bacteria. Where do intestinal bacteria, where do they come from? They come from fiber. So the more fiber that you eat in your diet, the more bacteria you actually produce in your digestive tract. Because fiber gets broken down by bacteria into short-chain fatty acids, some of which butyrate, propionate, and fumarate protect the colon against damage, against polyps, against cancer, diverticuli, diverticulitis. So we need to, again, more fiber, etc. So COWSPIRACY resinol gets turned into enterolactone by the correct bacteria. So there's been some interesting studies, we don't have time to talk about it, the difference between meat eaters and vegans and vegetarians, much different bacterial flora. Needless to say, vegans do much better on their flora. And enterodiol. Flax seeds by far have the highest levels of COWSPIRACY resinol and matcha resinol, but to free up these compounds, you need to grind them up. So grinding up your flax seeds and other nuts are a good thing, especially if you have any kind of digestive problems. So this is just a little one showing the content of some of these compounds. And then flax seeds have 367,000. That's like, wow. I'm going with the flax seeds. So I routinely recommend this to my patients. Take flax seeds. It adds fiber into their diet and also adds these protective substances. How am I doing on my time here? 30 minutes. I got 15 minutes? Is that right? Not good. Yeah. All right. Okay, forbidden rice, I mentioned, carrots, purple carrots, better, onions, red wine, coffee, green tea. So this is a slide just showing about Okinawans. Okinawans' diets has changed now. So, you know, when people get more money, they eat more meat, they eat more bad foods. So it's better to be poor in terms of your diet. And there was a question was asked about, you know, these foods are too expensive. They're not, as Will pointed out. They're actually much cheaper, and you could live off hardly anything. And I think you showed in the movie What the Health, going shopping, I think the bill was like $22 for a week's worth of food. It's like, how many? 4 people. That's incredible. It's like, okay, make the right choices. All right, what about protein? Okay, so this is an important part of this lecture, and I wanted to spend a little time on it. So when you measure how much protein that you actually require, it's actually very little. And the way they do that is they measure how much, first they make you deficient, and then they see how much nitrogen, when they add protein foods, because protein foods contain nitrogen, how much appears in your sweat, in your stool, and your urine. For a 150-pound person, about 70 kilograms, basically it takes about 22 grams, 10:25. What time is it? can't read that. Oh, 8 minutes behind. All right. So the highest correlation to cardiovascular disease of any dietary factor is the amount of animal protein that you consume. And this has been known for at least 91, how many years? Almost 30 years. So there's a great textbook that I used to use to teach nutrition, Nutritional Biochemistry and Metabolism with Clinical Implications by Maria Linder, and says it right there in a big giant table. The most significant factor dietarily is animal protein. Okay, so if you haven't read Proteinaholic, you should read it. Garth Davis, excellent book, well referenced, has some good material in there. So we talked about, so this is how they measure how much protein you're supposed to get. And again, they do a nitrogen balance study. And once they do this nitrogen balance study, 150-pound person, it's about 22 grams. But they want to make sure that the vast majority of the population's covered. So they do this thing, 2 standard deviations above that upper value. And basically, it comes, and this covers 97.5% of the population. And that's how they get that figure, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So that's already set a little bit high. Most people don't need nearly that much. The RDA level of protein for a 150-pound male, a little less for females, is about 54 grams. It's not very much. So when I go out to eat in restaurants, especially Asian restaurants, they say, what do you want for your protein? And I say, I want 3 times more broccoli than what you normally put in there. No, how much, what kind of protein do you want? I said, broccoli. So I have a slide that got deleted that shows that broccoli has more protein for 250 calories than a sirloin steak. And it's like, people don't realize that plant foods have protein in them. And I think you talked about that in What the Health, which was great. But it's something, I tried to correct you. 10 minutes, okay. Well, that's really clear, it's good. All right. All right, so anyway, so it doesn't take very much protein. So the amount of protein in Kip and Keegan's film that they showed with the broccoli and the rice was actually about 112 grams of protein, which is like, wow, that's a lot. So let's take a look. If you're a weightlifter bodybuilder, your requirement goes up about 10%. So from 54 grams maybe to 60 grams, that's a bodybuilding weightlifting champion. So I went to school with Mr. New York State, and he used to try to convince all his fellow weightlifters that they don't need to take these protein powders. It just makes me, this protein powder thing just makes me so not happy. So, you know, he would say, you know, don't do it, you don't need it. Look at me, I've won the last 3 years in a row, and they still just can't get it out of their head. It's fixated in there. So this was a study, 12 studies, basically showing the amount of protein that people consume, male and female, 68, 76 grams, 57, 73, plenty of protein. And again, we talked about that. Too much protein is more problems than not. These are a couple of vegetarians. Look at the pectorals on that gorilla. You don't see him eating any kind of animal products, maybe some ants. I think they might eat ants. So what about the environment? Michael Pollan, when asked how much meat, actually I was just corrected, how much meat and dairy that you needed in a sustainable way, comes out to, would you come up, 2 ounces. So 2 ounces of 7.6 billion people had basically 2 ounces every 7 to 10 days. What's the point of that? There's no point at all. It's completely, you know, not relevant to our situation. Don't do it. Okay. So this is our naturopathic oath that we take when we graduate. Way back in 1983, through precept, lecture, and example, I will assist and encourage others to strengthen their health, reduce risks for disease, preserve the health of our planet. So when I read this, for ourselves, our families, and future generations, I thought, wow, that's kind of important. Include other animals. So I have a proposal to change our little oath to include other animals and other species, of which, as we know, 200 species every day become extinct. So Bill Mitchell was one of our founding fathers. He was the first person I preceptored, first doctor, founded the Bastyr University, and was an amazing physician. And he came up with this statement that naturopathic physicians are part of the Earth's immune system designed to go out and save our planet. So that's why I'm here, trying to be active and to spread the word. So a little word about supplements. So everyone usually asks about supplements. We're exposed to the largest array of toxicants in the history of humanity. If you flew on a plane cross country, you got about 1/10 of a millisievert to 2/10 of a millisievert. So we're constantly being bombarded by electromagnetic radiation and stuff. When you drive on the highway, you're sucking in car exhaust. So people just don't realize how much they're being exposed to. And so this is something that, in order to protect us, to maximize our protective benefits, there are certain nutrients that would be helpful to take in. So low levels of antioxidants increase cancer, providing the body with additional antioxidant nutrients. And it can come from foods, spirulina, it can come from maki berries, it can come from salal berries. There's many, many different ways that we can supplement, and using juicing is really quite an excellent way to do that. So some nutrients that are really important: selenium. So we need to promote the use of more algae foods. Algae has a significant amount of selenium in there, and it's something that we know most people are deficient in selenium, which makes glutathione peroxidase for your liver. Carotenoids. Any chance you get to put more carotenoids in your diet is great. So Dunaliella salina is an algae that grows off the coast of New Zealand, used mostly as a food colorant like annatto. But I use it, I have a vitamin company, and I use it in my supplements because Dunaliella salina will make your skin yellow. So when you go out into the sun, it's a good thing to have those pigments in your skin. It protects your skin from the inside out. They guesstimate 1 out of every 3 people will get some form of skin cancer during their lifetime. So why wouldn't you want to color your skin more? And to do that, you want to use flavonoids, especially carotenoids. We can't get into vitamin C, but Linus Pauling believed 8 to 10 grams a day is what we should be consuming. Tocotrienols, we mentioned from annatto. Milk thistle is something I recommend for everyone to take on a daily basis. Milk thistle, most potent antioxidant for the liver ever discovered in nature. Astaxanthin is one of my new favorite toys. Astaxanthin is a pigment most associated with salmon. The salmon color of salmon comes from an algae. And so rather than eat the salmon, just eat the algae. And astaxanthin is something a number of companies make. Spirulina, we mentioned before, extremely high in carotenoids, also high in other trace elements, including selenium. Additional nutrients, vitamin D, mushrooms. So as part of that top 20 foods, we put in shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms are an excellent source of vitamin D. If you take shiitake mushrooms and you put them in the sun, pleats up during the middle of the day, they will make thousands of units more of ergocalciferol, vitamin D. Great way to get your vitamin D. MK7 is a vitamin K that's really important for your bone health. So many people develop osteoporosis, especially females. Natto, not to be confused with annatto, is a slimy, stuff that our sea shepherd was talking about. It's actually really good for you. So, and it's really high in MK7. So annatto is an acquired taste usually. Boron, strontium, manganese, and silica. Those are trace elements, again, really important for your bone health. Chromium, important for insulin sensitivity, pantothenic acid for your adrenal glands. One word, depending upon your levels of homocysteine. So, right now, Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's, all these conditions are becoming like epidemics in our baby boomers. So the level of homocysteine in your blood is an important marker to tell you how much inflammation you have going on in your brain. So we know that methylcobalamin, which is one of the forms of vitamin B12, and sometimes can be low in vegans, but not all. I wanted to say about the iron thing. If anyone's read the China study, they actually showed that the vegans had higher levels of iron than compared to their omnivore counterparts. So that's not always true. Vitamin C is something that it goes really well with iron. So if you eat plant foods that have iron in them, if you take a vitamin C supplement to go with those high iron plant foods, you're actually going to absorb that iron much more efficiently. There's a condition called hemochromatosis that you don't want unless you're exposed to the bubonic plague. But those people have a much higher incidence of cancer, heart disease, that have higher levels of iron. 10% of the world is heterozygous for hemochromatosis. So it's something that you actually want your iron levels to be at a minimal level rather than a higher level. So lower iron is actually better. Okay, summary and conclusion. How can we incorporate the blue zone principles into our culture? Eat plants, pet animals. This is the front of my shirt that I wear when I do my triathlons, and I get What's that? I do. I'm saying, Dan, take whoever wants to buy that shirt. Dr. Chung is actually the one that designed the shirt, so I got to give him credit. But I have another one that says, eat plants, not animals. I like the pet animals thing. Makes people think yeah, pet them, don't eat them, This was a seminar I did a number of years ago, an Ayurvedic cooking seminar, where we cooked this food, and it just, there's probably 8 or 9 foods in the top 20, although don't look too closely. I think we had some paneer in here. This was before I became vegan. Over here, this is bitter melon, I forgot to mention. So Mamartica charantia, one of the healthiest foods you can get. Again, we just don't eat any of this in the United States. It's really protective against diabetes. Okay, resources over here. I highly recommend to look the Sacred Lifeline project that Dr. Rao is now in full service for, and time out, get the hook. Okay, and thank you for listening. I appreciate your attention.